Welcome back to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. My name is Derek Brown, and today we're going to talk about the top 24 running backs in fantasy in my early redraft rankings for the 2024 season. Before we get rolling here, if you want a chance to win a 1-year premium subscription to Fantasy Pros, all you need to do is subscribe to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel right now, comment below in this video, that's it. We'll be announcing the winner right here on the channel, so turn on notifications so you can be alerted when new episodes are up and to claim your prize. All right, first running back we're going to discuss here, RB24, Bijan Robinson. Look, I understand he's probably not going to catch a lot of passes this year, but in the Washington Commanders offense, we could see a lot of rushing efficiency depending on where they go at quarterback, a la maybe it's Jane Daniels. But outside of even that type of microcosm, Bijan Robinson last year was a productive running back, RB22 in fantasy points per game, RB14 in fantasy points per opportunity. Dan Campbell has talked him up already in offseason pressers, so don't be surprised if he walks away with double-digit touchdowns this season and is the clear lead back in Washington. Okay, RB23 on the list, Devin Singletary, the New York Giants' new lead back, and last year he proved he could carry the mail. Weeks 9 through 18, averaged 19 touches, 86.6 total yards. He was the RB21 in fantasy points per game. We always talk about it, but volume is king in fantasy, and Devin Singletary is sure to get it this year in New York. Speaking of volume, a guy that racked up a ton of it, the RB22 on this list, Zamir White. Last year, he proved he could carry the mail. In weeks 15 through 18, he averaged 23.3 touches, 114.3 total yards as the RB12 over that stretch. And it wasn't just that he racked up the volume, people. During that cup of coffee as the starter, amongst 41 qualifying running backs, he was 6th in yards of contact per attempt, 17th in success rate. Zamir White proved he could be the lead back in Vegas last year. So excited to see him as an RB2, a rock-solid RB2, walking into this year's fantasy season. All right, the RB21 on this list, DeAndre Swift. Got the bag from the Chicago Bears, kind of surprisingly, considering last year, yes, he was the RB24 in fantasy. That was great, but we saw him kind of wither a little bit down the stretch. Amongst 49 qualifying running backs last year, DeAndre Swift wasn't this explosive back that everybody paints him to be. 40th in yards to contact per attempt, 30th in missed tackles forced per attempt. DeAndre Swift got the bag, so that should make him the clear lead back in Chicago, but don't look at him as anything more than an RB2 this season. Speaking of getting the bag, Josh Jacobs, RB20 on this list, arrives in Green Bay as Aaron Jones got shoved out the door, and he was limited to 13 games. Yeah, he had the quad strain and really a down season. So kind of surprising that he got the massive paycheck that he got from Green Bay, but if he's going to be the guy and he's going to get all the touches and play all the snaps this year, I know they brought back A.J. Dillon, but still, he's never been the guy for that team. If Josh Jacobs can be that guy, we're looking at an RB2 this season with maybe some upside, considering what we see out of the Green Bay Packers offense. But we need him to bounce back as far as a tackle breaker, because that went out the wayside, went out the window last year. 12th highest stuff rate last year. He was 37th in missed tackles forced per attempt. So Jacobs, after the high volume season, needs to shrug it off. We need a bounce back, but that doesn't mean that he can't be an RB2 with upside this season. Speaking of RB2s with upside, RB19 on this list, Isaiah Pacheco. Last year, he was the RB14, and really, what we could see this year for Pacheco, if Jerick McKinnon does not get re-signed, could be fantastic. Jerick McKinnon last year in the 4 games that Isaiah Pacheco played without McKinnon active, 20.2 touches, a shade over 100 total yards per game. He played at least 70% of the snaps in the span in 3 of 4 games. So Pacheco, if he's going to be the all-time play all the downs kind of guy for Kansas City, we see this offense bounce back. Maybe they go wide receiver, continue to add to that room. Even after the signing of Marquise Hollywood Brown this offseason, I say Pacheco could be in for a fantastic year. All right, to RB18 on this list, David Montgomery. He was the RB15 last year, so maybe give him a little bit shade, considering. But we'll get to Jamir Gibbs later. Maybe a little bit better breakout year for him in his second season. But David Montgomery logged his second 1,000-yard rushing season of his career. After he returned from injury in Week 10, still averaged 15 touches and almost 76 total yards per game for a player that was 19th in missed tackles per attempt. If he can continue in a fantastic Detroit Lions offense, the early down opportunities are going to be there, as well as the scoring opportunities. All right, people could be surprised that I got this guy as low on my list as I do, but RB17, Rashad White. Rashad White was basically Leonard Fournette 2.0 for Tampa Bay last year, playing all the snaps, getting all the work, but not doing a ton with it. Yes, I understand he was the RB10 in fantasy, and that goes down to, look, volume has been king for running backs in fantasy. Volume remains king for running backs in fantasy. But I do have a little bit of trepidation about Rashad White, because amongst 49 qualifying running backs last year, he did not register higher than 40th in missed tackles forced per attempt, explosive run rate, or yards after contact per attempt. If Tampa Bay adds another competent running back to this room this offseason, we could see Rashad White dealing with more competition for touches than he did last season. I still think he could be a solid RB2, but I don't know if he could be an RB1 in 2024. All right, the next guy up here, RB16 on my list, Alvin Kamara. Kamara is still going to be a guy that we can count on as a rock solid RB2, considering he's going to get all the work. Maybe Kendre Miller factors in a little bit more this year, but again, he's going to need to be healthy. That remains to be seen. Alvin Kamara should still get most of the volume in this backfield. Last year, 10th in opportunity share, 8th in weighted opportunity, 9th in red zone touches. Those factors are all amazing, and that's why Kamara finds himself as a top 24 running back. The worrisome part about Kamara is, well, the touches have kind of piled up over the years, so is the volume, and he's not as young as he once was, nor as explosive. He was 40th out of 49 qualifying backs last year in missed tackles forced per attempt. This is extremely worrisome because, again, if he's not breaking tackles, maybe we see more Kendre Miller this season than anybody wants to see, unless you're a Kendre Miller truther, or you're punting running back to the later rounds. But with Alvin Kamara, he should still see the lion's share of all the work in the passing game. Last year, none of those numbers fell off. First in target share, 6th in yards per route run. If he gets the red zone work, which he should still is an RB2 in fantasy. All right, RB15 on the list, Kenneth Walker. He was RB20 last year, so a little bit of projection here. But look, all we need is Kenneth Walker to stay a little bit healthier. Last year, he dealt with a myriad of injuries. Bruised shoulder, strained oblique, chest issue, and a tender and troublesome calf muscle. That didn't stop him from averaging 17.3 touches and 82 total yards in the 14 games that he played at least 41% of the snaps. If he can hold off Zach Charbonnet for another season, he should still be an RB2 in fantasy. All right, RB14 on this list, going a little bit to the older side of the spectrum here. A guy I still firmly believe in, and it's Aaron Jones. What did we see at Aaron Jones last year? All we need to see is him healthy, and when he's healthy, he's still the guy that we've always loved in fantasy. In weeks 15 through 20, he averaged 21.6 touches, 120 total yards per game. In that stretch, amongst 47 qualifying backs, he showed that he's still the electric playmaker that we've always loved. He was just finally healthy and able to show that. He was 8th in explosive run rate and 10th in yards after contact per attempt. I'm not worried about Ty Chandler. Minnesota, if they address the quarterback situation in the draft, or, hey, look, if we get starts out of Sam Darnold and he's just competent or league average, Aaron Jones is a top 15 running back this season with RB1 upside. Okay, that leads me to a guy that I've not been high on in previous years, Joe Mixon at RB13. He can easily be an RB1 this year. He was last year as the RB11. But we need to see him continue to garner all of the snaps like he did in Cincinnati. He can easily do that in Houston. Not saying that he can't. So he can outpace this rank that I have him at right now. Considering last year he was 8th in snap share, 3rd in opportunity share. But again, he's another guy that we're worried about the efficiency metrics with. He was outside the top 35 running backs in every efficiency metric that I pretty much care about. Yards per touch, yards created per touch, breakaway run rate. So I'm worried about all of that side of Joe Mixon's game. But as Devin Singletary showed us last year, if you get all the touches, you get all the volume, I've said it a few different times, volume is what matters for running backs. Joe Mixon should be a locked-in top 15 back this year with RB1 upside. That brings us to my RB12 on this list, a name that people could be surprised, and really, if you watched him play last year, you should be surprised. That is James Conner. Look, all he did was the same things we've expected out of James Conner every year he's been in Arizona. These are the finishes he's had. RB7 in fantasy points per game, RB9, and RB13. It's pretty good. Now we're talking about, as well as, James Conner is arguably coming off of one of his most efficient seasons of his entire career. I don't think he's slowing down anytime soon. If he could stay healthy, he's going to be a fantastic value, and that's why I have him at RB12. Because last year, even though he was 21st in rushing attempts, he was 6th in rushing yards. He was 8th in missed tackles forced per attempt, 5th in yards after contact per attempt. Do we not think that James Conner can't be even better this year? Considering a fully healthy Kyler Murray, they add some more pass game weapons to this offense. James Conner can easily be an RB1 this year, and he is going to be a wonderful value in draft season. Speaking of polarizing guys, RB11 on this list. People could be surprised to find him this high, but James Cook, we need to put respect on his name. After Joe Brady took over as the Bills OC, weeks 11 through 18, that's exactly what James Cook was. He was the RB11 in fantasy. He was averaging 19.6 touches, 104.3 total yards per game, and we saw the pass game usage tick up for him. After that time, after week 10, he was 10th in target per route run rate, 4th in receiving yards per game, and 2nd in yards per route run. Now entering this year, no Stephon Diggs. Yeah, they'd probably address wide receiver in the draft. Of course, we all believe that. That's not going to take away from James Cook's pass game usage. And if he is the early down guy in this offense, Josh Allen regressing at all and rushing touchdowns, James Cook is a locked-in RB1. He has top 8 upside in the 2024 season. All right, RB10 on this list. Promising second-year player, and he eclipsed this last year. I just got a little bit of concerns. RB10 is Devon Etienne. He was the RB5 in fantasy points per game, but Miami bringing back Raheem Mostert on a new contract. I'm sure the ink just barely dried on that contract. So we have concerns about what is Etienne's role in this backfield. Is he going to be the lead guy? Does Mostert hold him off for another year? So while I'm a little bit lower than maybe consensus is on Devon Etienne, if he gets the backfield to himself, or even 55-60% of the opportunities, he's going to smash this ranking. But if he's still in a full timeshare with Mostert and dealing with him for red zone touches, we could see Devon Etienne disappoint. We could see him as an RB2, and maybe this RB10 ranking is a little bit too spicy for him. The thing is whenever he has the ball in his hands, he's an explosive, big play threat. We understand that. He could easily finish as a top 3 back this year if he gets the workload. All right, RB9 on this list, Travis Etienne. Look, I love Travis Etienne. He's an RB1 in fantasy. But we also have to talk about the type of season that he had last year, and it was extremely Jekyll and Hyde. Last year for Travis Etienne, weeks 1 through 8, averaged 22.3 touches per game, 106 total yards. He was just rocking along as the RB4 in fantasy. What did we see after week 9, though? Everything came crashing down. He only averaged 16.3 touches per game. The rest of the season, it was the RB22 in fantasy. This dichotomy is going to leave people, do I draft Travis Etienne? Do I fade him this year? Where do I sit? I still think he's going to be the lead back in Jacksonville. Still have him as an RB1, but I can't pump him up into the top 5 based off of those splits and that usage. All right, the big mountain man himself, Baltimore's new ball carrier in 2024. Derrick Henry finds himself an RB8. If you're surprised by this, you really shouldn't be. Derrick Henry is not slowing down at all. Last year, he was 9th in explosive run rate, 11th in yards after contact per attempt. If Gus Edwards could score double-digit touchdowns in this offense, Derrick Henry is due for huge touchdown expectations if he could stay healthy, which I project there's nothing to say that he can't. You're talking about a player that literally could score 12 to 15, maybe even more touchdowns in this season. Yeah, he's got to be locked in as a top 10 back in 2024. All right, talked about him earlier. Jamir Gibbs finds his way all the way up at RB7 on this list. Maybe it's a little bit spicy for some, but projecting a little bit of growth in his second season. He was the RB8 in fantasy points per game last year and the RB8 in fantasy points per opportunity. All we're saying is, look, Detroit's still going to run through this backfield. David Montgomery, Jamir Gibbs still going to get a ton of scoring opportunities for a really talented player. If Gibbs can take over a little bit more of this workload, maybe he cracks the top 5. Maybe he cracks the top 3. I won't rule that out, but still, I'm putting respect on his name, putting him inside this top 10, considering after David Montgomery returned last year, 14.1 touches per game, 73.1 total yards per game. Those numbers are awesome, but he's going to need the touchdowns and the pass game usage to pay off on this rank. I fully believe Jamir Gibbs can do it in 2024. All right, the RB6 on this list, Jonathan Taylor. All we want and all we need is a full season out of the Jonathan Taylor in this backfield, rocking alongside Anthony Richardson in an efficient rush offense in Indy. And that's what we saw last year. And heck, Jonathan Taylor, week 7 through 18, 21 touches per game, almost 100 total yards per game. He was 13th in yards after contact per attempt, the RB12 in fantasy points per game. I think he could pay off and then some in 2024. All right, now we break into the top 5. Saquon Barkley, all the way up at RB5. People are worried about, oh, well, does Jalen Hurts steal all the rushing touchdowns? Let's get this out of the way right now. Saquon Barkley is not DeAndre Swift. Saquon Barkley is not Miles Sanders. He's not either one of those guys. He's better at the goal line. You don't bring in a player of Saquon Barkley's talent level just to give the ball continually to Jalen Hurts at the goal line. Does that mean Hurts is going to go away from being a touchdown scorer inside the 5? No. Does that also mean that every single time they get inside the 5, it's, okay, well, now it's time for Hurts to sit here and rush it in? No. Jason Kelce's gone. So we're going to see some changes in this Philadelphia Eagles offense this season. And Saquon proved he could still be an every down player. Last year, in 11 of 14 games, played at least 70% of the snaps. Still showed that he's got the burst that we all have come to love over the years. 17th in explosive run rate. Saquon Barkley should be firmly planted inside your top 5 running backs for this year. All right, up to RB4 on this list, Kyon Williams. Kyon Williams was a big breakout guy last year. And I'm putting respect on his name, and we all should. Look, he shoved Cam Akers to the side, took this backfield over, and Sean McVay showed no hesitation giving him all the work, even before and after injury. RB2 in fantasy points per game last year. He was top 5 in basically every single metric. Also showed out in tackle breaking metrics. He was 25th in missed tackles forced per attempt. In weeks 2 through 17, he averaged 22.3 touches and 117 total yards. In 10 of his 11 games played, he played at least 72% of the snaps. Do we think that the Rams are going to run away from Kyon Williams? Maybe they add backfield help in the offseason and the draft. I don't want Kyon Williams to play 90% of the snaps every single week. I want him to stay healthy. You give me 65 to 70% of the snaps for Kyon Williams every single week, yes, he's still going to be a top 5 running back in fantasy. All right, now we're reaching the king realm. The top 3 running backs in fantasy this year. Leading this list off with RB3 on the list, Bejan Robinson. Arthur Smith is out. All the shenanigans are gone, baby. Bejan Robinson was the RB17 in fantasy points per game, and no fault of his own because he was breaking tackles. He was doing exactly what we wanted to. Last year, he just did not get the high leverage work, and that is because of all the Arthur Smith shenanigans. He was the RB12 in expected fantasy points per game. He was 31st in opportunity share. There is no way we should be living in a world where Bejan Robinson's outside the top 20, the top 12 running backs in opportunity share at all. As well as we had on top here, it was 32nd in red zone touches. This should not happen, and it's not going to happen in 2024. Bejan Robinson will be a locked-in top 5 back with RB1 overall upside. All right, the man, the myth, the legend, RB2 on the list is Bryce Hall. He was RB6 in fantasy points per game. We get Aaron Rodgers back under center this year. New York Jets are going to fly, and so is Bryce Hall. All we want is for this to be an efficient offense, and if Aaron Rodgers is back under center, we're going to get that. Bryce Hall, weeks 5 through 18, so basically after he got unleashed last year, and they took all of the training wheels off, averaged 20.2 touches, 102 total yards per game. We know the pass game utility that he carries, considering last year he led all running backs in targets, receiving yards, and receptions. Even if those numbers drop a little bit with Aaron Rodgers under center this year and the touchdowns go up, he will compensate for that, and he will be a top 3 back this season with RB1 overall upside. All right, no surprise here. The man, the myth, the legend, the guy that keeps on just defying the outcomes, and he is the guy, Christian McCaffrey at RB1. I'm not getting cute here. I get he's getting a little bit older. I understand the volume is piling up. But last year, Christian McCaffrey showed us no reason to push off of that or to not believe in him for the 2024 season. He was an RB1 in 81% of his games. What's changed in San Francisco? Nothing. He was a top 24 running back in every single game he played. He averaged 21 touches per game, 126.5 total yards, and he was 4th in explosive run rate, 10th in yards after contact per attempt. Christian McCaffrey is not slowing down. He is my RB1 this year walking into the 2024 season. All right, before I get up out of here, again, if you want a chance to win a premium Fantasy Pros subscription for 1 year, all you got to do is subscribe to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel right now. Comment below in this video. That's it. We'll be announcing the winner right here on the channel, so make sure you turn on notifications so you can be alerted when new episodes are up and to claim your prize. The 2024 fantasy season is getting closer and closer, baby. We're almost there. Let's go.